Adam Simecka, thank you for joining me this morning. We are coming out of the Christmas season, tail end of Christmas being yesterday, the whirlwind of all of that leading up to it, the day of, and then the next day, it's like, I feel like a little bit of recovery mode. Let me do a quick intro on your stuff here. You founded, most people are going to know you from like last spring. You're in Vegas. You were on the stage talking about Mana Bitcoin. Let me bring that up here real quick. You created Mana, the founder of Manna Wallet. Before that, you were doing mining. You're doing hands-free Bitcoin. You can get the BitKit miner. Now, all of your technologies that you've built have been very plug and play, easy to use, accessible. You've said, like so easy, grandma can use it. And that's what I really like about what you've done here. I'm going to bring up the BitKit, if it'll come up. There we go. Hands-free Bitcoin. You've got your BitKit there. It is sleek and beautiful. I really like the stuff you've built. I've also really enjoyed the approach you've taken with it and the values of the company. You can get one of these kits. You can basically, you plug it in, you scan the QR code on the back, and you get online and you start using it. Similar with Manna Wallet, I downloaded it here on my phone here, and let me just get that. Basically, here it is. Here I downloaded it. Seconds. I had it downloaded. You can run it. You can send and receive. Basically, what you've built is very approachable, simple, accessible. You don't have to do a lot of configuration. It'll just work. And then if you want to configure stuff, you can, but you don't have to have a lot of barrier to entry. And so your point from the beginning on working on this stuff was, hey, I want to mine, or I want to do Bitcoin stuff. I don't want to have to know all the things if I'm not techie or I don't know stuff. Is that accurate in your approach to all this work?
I couldn't have possibly said it better myself. That's actually, kind of the first principle thinking of a lot of Bitcoiners, but a missed step that I see a lot of times in product development. We tend to often get carried away, as many Bitcoiners do, in going down this rabbit hole, and a lot of times we start from kind of where we are, and we forget that we're so far down along in our journey. Not everybody's there with us. And I started with the mining company that I started in 2017 is when the concept kind of started forming, and I wanted to get into mining, and I started learning about it, and I'm like completely blown away at how complicated it is. Now, it's not too crazy. Like if you actually set out to figure out how to do everything and set everything up, most people could probably do it with quite a bit of effort. But again, that you have to get to a certain point to be able to want to put in that much effort to figure it out. And so I wanted to give people an opportunity to get into mining without needing to necessarily do a bunch of study and all of that, where they could just start and then they can start learning as they go. And so that's kind of where my first thought was in developing products for people, not necessarily for Bitcoiners, because there's a lot of products out there that Bitcoiners, have access to. But not all of them are products built for no coiners. And so I wanted to build a product, and I've continued to try to build products for people that are bridging that gap. And I think this is really important. And I'm about to give, all of my quote unquote competitors a huge tip here. But if you're going to just look at the total addressable market, and you're looking at the number of Bitcoiners, right? People that already hold Bitcoin, people that understand Bitcoin, people that are comfortable with using Bitcoin, that number of people, that market is so much infinitesimally smaller than the market of people that don't, right? So the people coming into Bitcoin are a much bigger market than the existing Bitcoiners right now. And so I think that, from my perspective at least, addressing that market is a much better value proposition. You're going to get more traction and there's a lot more opportunity there, because there's just so many more people and so much more need.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that was kind of my thought, both from the mining side and now what I'm working on with Manna, with the wallet, and getting a tool into people's hands that they can just start using without needing to necessarily know how to use it, or really what's going on under the hood. With that said, it was very intentionally, just with hands-free Bitcoin, but mostly now my focus is on Manna, and a lot of what goes into that is making sure that I'm building the tool that doesn't compromise, right? Because I think there are also a lot of compromises out there, with custodial wallets or, these centralized exchange type products where you're not really getting the benefits of Bitcoin. You're getting some of them, but you're not getting the censorship resistance. You're not getting, the ability to send a transaction to anyone, anywhere, at any time without permission from somebody else. You're not getting that guaranteed reassurance of non-rehypothecation, meaning that somebody's not taking your Bitcoin behind your back and reinvesting it or giving the same Bitcoin out to multiple people. The
Mhm.
really core tenets of Bitcoin that make it valuable. This is why we need Bitcoin. And once you start taking those things away, then you're stripping it less of its own nature. And I wanted to make sure that wasn't something that I was building. So I
Mhm.
wanted to build it the right way. And then people just, get those benefits as a side effect of actually just having a good, easy to use product.
It's awesome. Yeah, and you don't have to worry about like, when you're interacting with Bitcoin on your wallet, like what type of address it is, the fact that it's Lightning at all. Like to make transactions quick and easy and everything, there's a whole layer around Lightning and other layers and things that are out there. A lot of people, there's a knowledge bias Bitcoiners can get where like you've been putting in the work, you study it, you feel like, okay, I can translate it in a way that's straightforward enough, easy enough. And then you run into whether it's friends or families or new people, and maybe they're no coiners, maybe they're just very early, and you think, oh, they understand stuff, and they don't. Or you mention something like running a node, and they're like, what's a node? And you're like, oh my goodness. But a lot of people, you got to start somewhere. And if whatever that is, when they're starting, it needs to be easy. And then if they stick with it, they're going to learn over time. But you're decreasing all the barriers to entry for people, and it'll just work. Same with your mining setup. It's plug and play, and you don't have to worry about how you do stuff. Now you're going to point it. Say you're going to add up. There you go. There it is. Yeah, and it's sleek. It's beautiful. It's not loud. It's got a couple of S9s in there.
Yeah, that's my
Um,
heater, by the way. That's how I keep my room warm in the wintertime.
this time of year too. So like I've got a Fiat job during the day, and it's the time of year where the HVAC system in our building or wherever, you see a little space heater just running just for the warmth. And every time I see a little space heater in my head, I'm like, man, that should be running Bitcoin. It's just
Yep.
the heat creation for out of straight energy is just kind of funny. And you're largely, as I understand it, you're largely self-taught. I mean, you approach this kind of on your own. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but interested in it, realizing you needed to learn, dug in, and just tenaciously learned and worked and developed stuff. Not like going to school or being put through a program, but you're fairly self-taught. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say there's truth to that. But I also, I have to give credit where it's due. I think in some ways, just the term self-taught is a little bit of a misnomer because, somebody at some point had to figure it out, right? And you had to learn it somewhere. I didn't create Bitcoin. I'm not Satoshi.
Doxing Satoshi.
Don't I'm accused of it all the time. I don't know why. I'm just kidding. I'm not really. But no, I'm definitely not Satoshi. I'm not near on that level. But my point is, like, everybody that really learns anything most of the time learns it from somebody else, unless they're creating something from scratch. Which, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I've learned, by creating the mining product, my wallet. Both of these ventures were fairly novel, and we created something that didn't exist before to some degree in many aspects. And so, yeah, through those methods, I've done a lot of self-teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I just to give credit where it's due, I've learned a lot from other people. I would consider myself like mostly self-inspired. You know, nobody was there for me to say, hey, you should buy Bitcoin. I didn't have that person. You know, maybe you did. Maybe somebody else, you know, listening has had that person that just was nagging at him, like, hey, man, you should probably think about, you know, saving in a money that can't get printed to infinity. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that, you know, so I actually had to kind of come through a back door into Bitcoin. And I think a lot of people can relate to coming in Bitcoin with Bitcoin serving a need that they have. And for me, it was in the early days, it was investing, right? I saw Bitcoin as an investment. I kind of saw it like a stock. I was investing in stocks, and it I realized what proof of work was early on, and so that was my saving grace. Is I had read this article, and it talked about proof of work, and it blew my mind. And I knew that it was the future, and I was like, how do I invest in this? Like, I need to invest in it. And so I went home that day and I bought as much Bitcoin as I could. I sold all my stocks and put it all into Bitcoin, and unfortunately a few other coins at that time too. But I learned along the way that when it comes to the proof of work aspect, and really what the purpose of what I was looking for and needing, which I think is what most people are looking for and needing, and that is a solid form of money, Bitcoin really doesn't have any competitors.
Absolutely. And we all have, well, I think most of us have that moment where it's new, you're learning the space, whether that's recently or for those of you listening now or years ago. You go on that little shitcoin journey where you're trying to just understand what all this is. And then for those of us paying attention and have some base principles, you come back to Bitcoin for the right reasons. I mean, to say like they enter this space, they feel late. I felt late. And then to be in it for, to call it, some 6 years ago where I was just evaluating this space, I think what helped keep me aligned with my morals and the compass in the space were principles I had that, yeah, you start out as financial, you're thinking, oh, number go up, or I want to get in on this. And then you write it up, you write it down. If you're paying attention to the fiat price, which is hard not to, when you write it down, you have to reconcile your why and what this is really about. And I think what planted that seed for me, and I got it out here, was, gosh, 15 years ago, this book, Creature from Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin. So long before I had found Bitcoin, I was like, well, what's the solution to this effed up whole system conspiracy thing we have? And even if it's not a conspiracy, well, it's a rigged game, buddy. So as you're aware, so that helped basically make me think, well, there's gold. I could do gold. And for a while there, it was like gold, silver, or like, if I'm going to live, what do I need? You've gone off on military deployment. You see firsthand, you think about kind of like survival, if you will, or just sort of like, if we're going to be people on this planet, how do things work? How do we function? What do we need to do when things get hard? What do we fall back on? And it's that core stuff. It can be your faith, and it can be your skills, and your conviction, and just going out there and doing things, getting up in the morning, saddling up. This book helped align a lot of values for me that when I found Bitcoin, I was then like, oh, there's a lot to this that's beyond just the money. Being the best property you can have, the hardest asset you can hold, it fixes the rule over theft. But you're familiar with this book and gone down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, highly recommend it. If anybody has not read that book and is interested in Bitcoin or anything tangential, I would honestly say that book is good for anybody. If you touch the US dollar, you need to read that book.
Totally. Let me bring up to stage something here. Where do I have it? Oh yeah, I think of the monopoly man, the monopoly money we have. I'm going to read a quick thing. Let's see, where do I have it? So, sorry for the delay here. So yeah, the creature from Jekyll Island, it really gets into a lot of history that informs you about money. And when you mention the dollar, or I've talked to people trying to orange pill them even, and you presume a lot about what they understand about money. And for a lot of people, whether they know anything about Bitcoin or not, they think for a lot of them, they misunderstand the dollar. Uh, basically, I mean, basically, we got to end the Fed. In my view, it sounds stark and harsh, but things are breaking. And I mean, even, um, gosh, it was after the 2008 financial crisis, and the money was printing to bail out banks, and I realized, okay, this is not working. Things are broken. I was floored by the fact that the Federal Reserve was printing like 10 to 15 billion dollars a month at the time, and I was like, how can this last? Well, lo and behold, just add a zero to the tail end of the dollar or the debt or the printing or the whatever, and lo and behold, they could keep printing the money and keep playing the game. Uh, uh, so 6 people met in secret. I'm just going to read this quick thing because you posted a reference to a video about it. If people haven't heard of it, the creature from Jekyll Island, what is that about? 6 people met in very much in secret to get the Federal Reserve Act passed. Cozied up to Woodrow Wilson, and when Wilson was elected, I mean, they funded him. Got elected and got the Federal Reserve Act passed. It was Nelson Aldrich, father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller, Abraham Andrew, Assistant Secretary to the U.S. Treasury, Frank Vanderlip, President of the National City Bank of New York, Henry Davidson, Senior Partner at J.P. Morgan, Benjamin Strong, Head of J.P. Morgan Trust, and Paul Warburg, more commonly known name. He was like the kind of that Monopoly Man character, but he was representing the Rothschild banks, and you can go back into centuries of deep state monetary management or control, if you will, where they're not as worried about the politics or the laws. It's very much about controlling the money, and therefore pass the laws or left or right, whatever. If you control the money, you control a lot of things. And so we see that playing out in various ways. I know that's a big open-ended topic. Any thoughts you have about that stuff?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. I will just say, that book, that story was, it's a piece of history that was intended to be written like a story because it reads as a story, like a completely fictional, made-up story, but it's real. And that's the scariest part about it. But you start reading this book, and it tells like this, this dramatic, mysterious fiction novel, and it sucks you right in. And at some point, like in the first chapter, you realize, and he expresses very plainly, G. Edward Griffin, the author, that this is not, this is not a fantasy. This is not fiction. This is real. Mm-hmm. And it's just crazy because it tells like so many other stories that we've probably read or heard in our lives that are just, crazy and wild beyond our imagination, because it's got all of these elements, the secrecy, the mystery, all this stuff, all tied into this one story, but it's just a historical account. Mm-hmm. And it's all reinforced and backed up with other historical documents and references, just to show that it's real. But when you're reading this, I got through the whole book and I'm just like dumbfounded. I'm like, I cannot believe this is all actually real. Like this all not only happened, but continues to happen. And people are just asleep at the wheel. And that's another point that I was going to make about something you were saying earlier, about, things being hard, or, you mentioned, being in the military and that sort of thing. And there's a certain time where you look at yourself and you think about, the reality of things. And that's really what it comes down to, is what's real. And I think that a lot of people are asleep at the wheel because we live in this fake society that's propped up with fiat money. And I do believe that fiat money is the root of that problem. I don't believe that, it's the root of all problems necessarily, like it's a magic switch, but I do think that it is like the base layer in which we build our lives on, simply because and it's been said before, this isn't something new that I'm saying, but basically half of every transaction we make in our lives is tied to that fiat money, right? Just most people on earth. Hopefully, you and I are sprinkling in a little bit of Bitcoin transactions in there too, some peer-to-peer stuff. But that's why we have words like buy and sell. We're not always just like trading and bartering. We are exchanging for a temporary medium of exchange or store of value, or in even some cases, unit of account. I'm just using kind of the three functions of money there. But you're using a money, right? So that's what you're doing. That's the purpose of money. Money is to hold value, to exchange it for something else. And so when that fundamental layer is corrupted and broken, it affects everything on top of it. And so that's why I think a lot of people are in this like trance that I say, is because they've built their lives on a fake money, and they're allowed to just go through life without needing to worry about, what they need to do, because, all they have to worry about is this imaginary 2% inflation target that they don't necessarily always feel. Right. So people are just blinded to it. They don't necessarily feel like they need to care. But if you really get down to it, and these people actually have a wake up moment, it's really not hard to figure out what the problems are. We have books, we have people, podcasts, we have lots of information out there that can lead us down to the truth. But you have to come to that point in your life where it matters enough for you to seek that truth.
Yeah, I heard an interesting thing recently. I think Jeff Booth said it. Basically, somebody was asking, like, how do you orange pill better? How do you get people to need it or want it? And Jeff was like, people don't come to it till they feel like they need it. Usually they have to need it. And in America, a lot of times we feel like we're fine. Yeah, it's getting a little hotter in this pot, but we're fine. You don't feel it. You can still function. When I would try to orange pill people, they'd be like, well, what's Bitcoin backed by? At least the dollar's backed by gold or what? And it's like, what is the dollar backed by? Proof of empire, proof of war, proof of fiat. Basically, it's the most aggressive kind of hard to escape fiat, I guess you would. Whereas Bitcoin being the largest decentralized and secure at this time network you can have. I tell people, run a node, take self-custody. We need to support this thing. And like you refer to, the circular economy. People get into Bitcoin and I would say typically treat it as a savings, a store of value. The majority of their holdings is going to be held and kept safe and a nest egg for them. But it is important to do transactions, to use the network, not just number go up and I'm going to sit on it. But people are like, don't spend your Bitcoin. You know how much, how much was this coffee cup in Bitcoin years ago? Hey, spend and replace. Our language of unit account is in the dollar. It's kind of just the air we breathe, the language we know when we think of money. So yeah, we're thinking in terms of dollars all the time. But if you would just, when you can buy stuff where you can, as you can, and you can buy it in Bitcoin, but I will buy in Bitcoin, and people will be like, oh, you're selling Bitcoin? I buy stuff anyway. I'll buy, and if I'm gonna, maybe it's very recently sold fiat into Bitcoin that I'm spending now, or I'm gonna buy that now. I'm gonna spend and replace, and so you're using Bitcoin as a transaction layer, which is important for this community and for the network as well, is to be using the network, filling those blocks with just transactions because we can. So that's important.
Yeah.
It brings to mind thoughts I've had about the circular economy and tying into the adoption cycle. I have you've talked in the past about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And last spring, people are familiar with this graph. I feel like we've been sort of like, I'm curious what your thoughts are. We've been kind of like riding this chasm, maybe, or are we coming out of it into early adoption with treasury companies and corporations getting into this space? Last spring, or maybe about a year ago, you were feeling some I don't want to put words in your mouth like concerns, but politically, we see what happened more recently with the samurai devs, attacks on developers. TradFi is moving in. Governments are like, okay, we can't apparently kill this. Can we control it? Maybe. Oh, maybe not. Okay, now what? Strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's like I'm kind of agnostic about it. I think it's good for America to do it. If a nation state wants to be relevant, they should probably figure that out. Do I necessarily personally care if they do or don't? I don't know. I don't think so, because I think bottom line, I want plebs like us to be able to have and use and protect the network. But I would think nation states want to do that. What are your thoughts about governments entering this space, taking on strategic Bitcoin reserves, as they probably will, or at least keep the assets they seize, if nothing else, I guess, let alone the samurai devs, the attacks on devs, maybe generally. I know some of this is legacy Biden stuff, but I don't see it getting fixed. Do you ever worry about, say, as a dev working on Manna, do you have you had to navigate with Manna at all in your business or your work in the space, given like, well, Keone and Bill are in federal prison right now? I'm not connecting the two at all, but there's that chill.
Yeah.
What do you think about
that? Yeah, that's definitely something I think about a lot. And that's unfortunate. And I've kind of said it this way before, but I feel like I can't always say exactly what I want to say, which is a travesty, because I'm an American and I have the freedom of speech and I have constitutionally protected rights. So did Keone and Bill. But you know, in that case, I feel like there was some injustice, and that can happen to anybody. I'm not going to stop, you know, speaking my mind and saying, you know, exercising my First Amendment right. But there is some degree of self-censorship that I you know have to that I feel like I have to express, which again I wish I didn't have to, and a big part of that is recent events. You know, you look at the samurai case, there's other cases as well, and there's a list of people that are facing federal charges or in federal prison right now, essentially that were involved with building freedom technology. And so there's obviously a lot of nuance there and semantics on, you know, the specific reasons behind why they were charged and these sorts of things. But when it really comes down to it, you know, this is going to create a public perception of a certain environment. And that's something that developers like me are always looking at, because Bitcoin is a freedom technology. Bitcoin liberates people. Bitcoin separates people from the creature from Jekyll Island, to use the title of that book. Or in other words, the system that continually robs people, because there's an entire financial system that's built under our feet right now that is built in such a way to extract your value in the most efficient way possible that they can. And it's, you know, it's not, in my mind, it's not a financial system that sets us up for success, both, you know, from a sovereign perspective, but also as a global one too. I think back to the I'm not sure the origins of this, and maybe you know, but there's the saying, hard times create strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and it's a cycle. And so I think that Fiat is really the culmination of the part of that cycle where we're creating the weak men. And I think that that's kind of already happened in my eyes and my perspective. I think a lot of the modern world right now has been turned into weak men that just follow, you know, politicians, that follow, you know, whatever their news station is telling them. They're not actually doing any of their truth seeking themselves and uncovering those truths and doing their own research and doing their own study and going down that path. I think that a lot of events like COVID and things like that have started to kind of wake people up to a lot of these things. But for the most part, and you brought up the adoption curve. I think the point I'm trying to make now is if you walk into any room, with enough people in it, and you look around, there's the likelihood of those people understanding Bitcoin is extremely, extremely low. And
Yeah.
so if I were to, make a judgment on, where we are in adoption of this technology that I believe is inevitable over a long enough time frame, I still think we're really, really, really early.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't even think we've reached that chasm yet. And yes,
Wow.
you've got governments, you've got public companies, you've got large hedge funds, and even individuals, retirement accounts. All of these people are quote unquote getting into Bitcoin, but I think that there's obviously some disclaimer there, because a lot of these people are not really buying, holding, or using real Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Their only purpose is to get price exposure. And a lot of
Yeah.
the times they're doing these through instruments like ETFs, or even other publicly traded companies that hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet, which I'm not saying is necessarily all bad. But my point is, inevitably, the governments and the companies and the corporations, they're going to want to participate in this asset that's basically going up forever. So I think it is inevitable for these things to happen. But when it comes to what Bitcoin actually really is, the network itself, most of these large institutions are not using it, and that's not going to protect them. An ETF is not going to save you from the things that Bitcoin was designed and created to protect you from. I think you can do it right, and I think there are people that are doing it right. I think for the most part, countries like El Salvador, they're doing it right. They're holding their own real Bitcoin. They're
Mm-hmm.
also broadcasting public addresses for people to audit publicly, which I think is great. I think everybody should do that. If you're holding Bitcoin, in a large amount of Bitcoin, that I think people need to. I think it's important for people to be able to audit that publicly.
Yeah.
I would love to see every publicly traded company post a Bitcoin address. If the purpose of their business is to hold Bitcoin for their company, I think their shareholders, at a minimum, if not the whole public, should have access to that information. Well, I guess if you're a publicly traded company, it would be the public anyway. But maybe if you're a private company, maybe share that with your shareholders, whatever. But my point is, if you hold the Bitcoin and just say, I have the Bitcoin because I say so, I don't think that that's quite enough, especially if you're holding it with somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've got another third party involved and you have to ask permission to use that Bitcoin, it's not Bitcoin. That's my perspective.
Yeah.
You also have countries like Bhutan. I think they're doing it
Yep.
the right way
I was
too.
just going to mention Bhutan. Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So anyway, my point is, very few people on a large scale are doing it in a way where I think that I would qualify it as real Bitcoin adoption, which is the part of the inevitability I think that is coming.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, given a long enough time frame, all of these centralized products are going to start getting chinks in their armor, and they're potentially going to fail at some point. I'm not saying, I'm not going to be Chicken Little over here and cry about the sky falling, but I think that at some point over a long enough time frame, Bitcoin is going to actually be a catalyst to cause some of these other things to fail, because Bitcoin is a rock solid foundation, and all these other things are built on, paper, basically.
Yeah. Foundations of shifting sand, and they're just dumping sand into it, and it's shifting. Uh, I totally agree with you on, it's TikTok next block. You can't steal that. You can't force that. You can't take control of it. Now, could large entities spin up a bunch of nodes or take control of mining? I mean, those are um, downstream risks that I think are important, but countries and nation states don't want to be last, I don't think. And ultimately, they may be hedging their bets. I wonder if, like China is taking a look at Bhutan, or other countries are taking a look at El Salvador. And in my mind, the U.S. is doing a lot of overt things so that we have our, the rare earths, the minerals, the industry. It's like, okay, we got to get real here. China, I would think, or Russia could be quietly like getting in here and there. And they talk about gold or bricks and all the paper, a new paper trade system on gold. What they're all worried about is the money. And what the ultimate conclusion that any of them paying attention would be like, this Bitcoin thing kind of fixes it all. And the proof of reserves access to it, we could pontificate over like the amount of gold in Fort Knox and whatever happened to that question. Like we were going to go in there and find out, right? With Elon's help, or Trump was going to go in there and like check it out, and then that kind of just went away. Like other things, kind of just you're still talking about that? And it's like, aren't we? Bitcoin provides that ethics to it. It's like you can see here what's on the blockchain. Like as a nation state or a company, if you're saying you're doing stuff, shouldn't you be able to just say, yeah, here it is? I would hope so. Bitcoin fixes a lot of these things. It changes the rules, fixes and realigns incentives. So what I'm hoping that it does, there's kind of a great realignment going on where the roots are growing into the old game, and I hope that it repairs and heals a cancerous game that we're kind of stuck in, that it's sick. So
I think it will. I mean, I'm positive it will. I am 100% positive it will. The one thing I can't say for sure is the time frame in which that happens, but it's going to happen for the same reasons why gold has value today, for thousands and thousands of years. Why does gold have value? I mean, certainly there is some degree of functional utility value of gold, but it's very small, and the monetary premium placed on gold is most of the value of gold right now. When you buy gold, the vast majority of that cost incurred is due to the monetary premium of it. But why is that? Why does that happen? Why in the year 2025, almost 2026, why are we paying so much money for gold? Why is it valuable to us? Why do people want it? Why do people need it? And it comes down to this simple fact. It exhibits the most properties of money, right? So if you look at what a good money does, gold exhibits the most of those properties and has exhibited the most of those properties the best over the time frame in which it existed. No one at any point in time in history said, I'm going to make this shiny rock valuable. It wasn't imposed by a person. It was imposed by nature. And that is exactly what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin imposes its own value through its own properties because it just happens to be defined by the properties that make money, right? It exemplifies what a good money is and what a good money does. And so by nature, over time, people figure that out. I figured it out. Sounds like you figured it out. And every day, more and more people figure out that Bitcoin actually is the path of least resistance, and it's going to preserve its value into the future the best. And so I think my proposal is that this is going to happen on a nation state level too. Mm-hmm. And the first countries that figure this out, you got El Salvador, Bhutan, other folks potentially looking at this, some European nations as well. This is just, these countries are going to be first in this building block, this foundation layer of the next era, right, into the future. And these the value stream of potential citizens are going to be increased and benefited from these early adopters. And whoever gets in at whatever time, you're going to be building your base sooner than other countries. And other countries, this is where the game theory comes in. Other countries are going to start seeing this happen. People are going to start, Bitcoiners are going to start flocking to these countries for sanctuary. And they're going to be growing at a much faster rate than a country that is essentially stealing from their populace.
Absolutely.
On a never-ending basis. So it's only a matter of time, whether we're talking about the U.S. or any other country, when you're looking objectively at what is benefiting you, Bitcoin is an inevitability. I just don't know when.
Yeah, it makes me think of Jason Lowry, who wrote the book Soft War, and a lot of the, being in the military, in Space Force now. I guess he recently got a promotion. He is Special Assistant and direct advisor to the commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, which is kind of like, wow. And a solid base Bitcoiner. He wrote his master's thesis, which was culminated into his book. And then he's gone dark here and there, largely been underground for a long time, it seems like. But the geostrategic nature of it all, when you think about in our modern era where, okay, yeah, gold has a lot of great behaviors, characteristics as a money and more so a store of value. But as far as divisibility, transportability, you get a coin or a bar and it's like, verifying its alloy or whatever. Bitcoin fixes all that. So it's like all of these large entities have to go Bitcoin at some point. They're going to talk and work gold, sure. But then you make a big trade deal and what? You got to have the security and load up a bomber cargo plane full of metal and ship that and then secure that and keep that physically secure with all these things. Bitcoin being that store of thermodynamic energy and like what is its intrinsic value? It's a store of that, all that proof of work energy plus the behavior characteristics of all of its decentralized secure protocol that simply works. So they have to figure it out. I think many of them have. They just have there could be this gameplay going on about what they're projecting out there and what they're actually doing and positioning themselves carefully around. I think they've been thinking about it a lot. What we're seeing or hearing isn't necessarily what they're doing, but Bitcoin's inevitable there. So it's definitely the direction we're going.
I want to make a point. You mentioned you were talking about Bitcoin being energy, and I think that's a great picture of what Bitcoin is, because what we're really talking about is two different energy systems, two literal energy systems. You've got the fiat system and you've got the Bitcoin system. The Bitcoin system is going to preserve its energy, its capital, its value much better than that fiat system. You talked about shipping physical bars of metal, across the planet. Think about all of the infrastructure that's required for that, all the personnel, all of the fraud, all that has to be taken into account. And anytime any of that is moved, it costs a ton of money. Anytime any of it's lost, you lose that value. Obviously, the loss can happen on Bitcoin too if you send to the wrong address or whatever. But my point is, you have all of these inputs in you have this loss in this system of fiat, right? That is all these middlemen, if you want to put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
With Bitcoin, you're cutting out all those middlemen, and so over a series of iterations of just using different forms of money over time, Bitcoin is going to hold that value, hold that power, hold that energy, while the fiat system just basically withers away and dies.
Totally. I think of the pallets of cash that you'd see a picture of that, like whether it goes to Ukraine or Iraq or Pakistan or Afghanistan or wherever. And then years later, it's like, what happened to that? Oh, I don't know. They bought stuff it was for reasons. And yeah, with Bitcoin, however they might try to obfuscate it as well, it just works so much better if you're going to play those games. And that's where also Bitcoin short circuits that game is, it becomes less and less affordable to play that old game because the fiat is eroding. And then also, why would you do that? And where Bitcoin is fixing incentives, I think it was Saylor who might have said something about like, the first country that starts printing its own fiat to buy Bitcoin wins. Now, there are downstream effects to ruining your currency. Then again, that depends on how you pivot. But it could be that there's a kind of an arms race, a money race, if you would, that nation states are going to start and then be like, oh, they're doing it. Oh, now they're doing it. And then musical chairs starts and it's like, get a seat. So it starts to cascade. And do you think, we talked about the adoption curve here in the cycle and that we may still be in this early adopters, or I should say visionaries era, and that we're maybe not even in the real chasm, if depending on what that chasm would be. at one level, I could say that, yes, we're still very early. It could be that cycles are over in terms of price action. People talk about the cycles, and if this is a bear market, it's shallow and short. I think it could be that 2026 is a big year. Um, None of this being seeing the future or any financial advice, of course, but I feel like something's like spring loaded in a way where stuff will start to happen, and it's not just little piddly retail stuff anymore. It's bigger and bigger and bigger players. OG wallets are trading ownership steadily, and there's going to be fewer of those and more bigger, big moneyed players. It could be that 2026 really pops simply because they don't have any choice with the supply and demand. So at one level, I could say cycles are over. We've spoken to other cycles, if you will, where the kind of like you alluded to, what I might connect to being in like the fourth turning in a way where, we've been in kind of like soft times, and now we've got people that don't even know where the money comes from, and maybe don't want to put in the work, and that we're going to face sort of a discrepancy in what needs to happen or what's going to break loose with people's willingness to do that. And they talk about the fourth turning. So I feel like there's a lot of like cycles going on. One of Bitcoin cycles could be related to the adoption curve is big changes in ownership and potentially an arms race connected to the adoption cycle. Could you see that happening in 2026?
Yeah. And I'll just, before I opine on this, I'll just say I love to make predictions. I have fun doing that.
Mhm.
I will also say I am terrible at timing. I'm usually right
Yeah.
at some point, but
On
it
a
takes
long enough time
yeah,
scale, you're right.
yeah, exactly. But I'm never right on the timing, except for a handful of exceptions. But so definitely don't follow my trading advice. In fact, there's a there is a account and software / platform website, whatever. I think it's called Proof of Price, and they've been like tracking my predictions, and I'm zero, a goose egg. So I've lost every prediction I've had on there. But it is funny to kind of get on there and see, how wrong I actually am, especially with how confident I am in the moment of making claims. So I
Yeah.
say all that with one big disclaimer that what I'm about to say might be completely wrong, but I do feel pretty strongly about a lot of this.
Mhm.
And one of those things is I do actually believe in cycle theory.
Mm.
I do think that there is a 4-year cycle in Bitcoin that will be observed and manifested in the price chart that we're all looking at. I don't necessarily think that that's super important, and I don't think you should trade it. That's my opinion.
Right.
But I do think that we are going to continue to see these cycles on this 4-year period. So, with that said, I think that we are potentially at what would maybe be considered a bear market right now. I don't know how long that's going to last, and I actually personally don't think it's going to last much longer. And so, some people might, based on the timing, because a lot of people like to look at the 12-month calendar and put Bitcoin on top of that and say, well, it's the cycle theory is broken because in December of this year, Bitcoin did this one thing and it's not doing that this year or whatever. I don't necessarily believe in that. I look at the Bitcoin calendar, right? Just the block time calendar. I think that the cycle theory will continue to show up in that.
Okay.
Um, and so, again, I think that we are maybe reaching a consolidation phase. I think we will have probably a pretty good 2026, and I think this is kind of like a mini bear market, right? I'm not saying that this is
Right.
like the long bear market. It could be. I don't know, but I do personally expect 2026 for Bitcoin to have a green candle, and the calendar year, that is, of course. Just simply because of where we are right now. I think there's, like you were mentioning, there's a lot of the OG wallets that are changing hands, a lot of cost basis being reset. And that also comes back to the other thing that I was going to mention. A lot of people are going to have an opinion on this. Some people will strongly disagree with me. And even a prior version of myself would disagree with this too. But I have come to the point, I'll give one more disclaimer. I may change my mind in the future, but I may come to the point.
I'm going to get to that.
Where I change my mind. But I currently, sitting here today, believe that Bitcoin is a power law.
Okay.
And again, I know that's a controversial thing to say. Some people
can shit on the power law thing because, you know, past performance and future predictions. So, but go ahead.
So my current working theory is that Bitcoin, so for anybody that hasn't necessarily studied power laws, and I haven't very much at all, I've scratched the surface, but power laws essentially describe outcomes in nature, typically looking at different distribution patterns in natural occurrences of things that happen. And usually it's based on not unexpected behavior, right? So most of the time when we look at sets of data, we see a normal bell curve, okay, the normal curve, and that classifies most of the sets of data that we observe as people. But out in nature, that's not always the case. And in some cases, when you don't see this natural bell curve, you see what's observed as a power law. And it is totally different. And it doesn't always behave how we might expect. And I'm not going to dive too deep into that because I'm not an expert, but there's lots of resources out there if anybody's interested. Again, I do believe Bitcoin is a power. I will give a caveat to that and say that I don't think that Bitcoin is a guaranteed power law against the US dollar, which is what the power law people are claiming.
Okay.
I'm categorizing them as
you can say power law breaks down if you frame it in other currencies, but you're saying beyond the fiat currency, you're talking about a different power law.
Yes, I'm talking about there's a lot of different ways to skin this, but the way I currently view it is purchasing power. I think that Bitcoin fits a power law model when it accounts for purchasing power. And the reason why I say that specifically is because right now it fits the dollar, and you plot it against the dollar on a chart and it looks really good. And a lot of people that are on the opposite side and don't believe Bitcoin is a power law will say it can't be a power law because the US dollar is going to fail. I agree with that line of thinking. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin doesn't become a power law. I think the US dollar is going to fail, and it's going to depeg from the store of the basically universal store of or unit of account for the world. So right now, most of the world measures their purchasing power in dollars, the vast majority. And that's just because we have, United States has the world reserve currency, the US dollar.
Right.
As that starts to wane, I think that there will be kind of this depegging from this power law chart, because we're going to start seeing Bitcoin start to deviate from that norm. And again, I think that is simply because the US dollar is losing its status as the world reserve currency. So right now, again, this is where I stand. I think Bitcoin will continue to track a power law model into the future, potentially indefinitely. In fact, I do believe it is indefinitely, and that would define it as a power law, that the value of Bitcoin will grow to a power law model forever. And the measure there is Bitcoin purchasing power.
Gotcha. And you've got your finger on the pulse of that sensibility being in mining, and you've connected this before related to like Graham's law, that, technology being tied to Graham's law and that Bitcoin doesn't. Our friend Michael Jordan says, one, power laws for bears. So I'm inclined to agree sometimes that Bitcoin breaks all models, and we cannot believe the face melting price action, if you will, that we might see because of basically failed fiat. So when people think of the power law, they're often thinking graphs they've seen that are very much in the fiat dollar. It's hard to, and you may have ideas about this, but sometimes I think, you know what, we could be tremendously, unbelievably amazed by what Bitcoin ends up doing because we simply have not even gotten through the chasm yet. Michael Jordan asks, what would happen for you, Adam, to change your mind or your opinion about 4-year cycles? Is it very much tethered to with mining, the halving rate and the issuance cycle, and it's supply and demand that way? Or could larger forces of supply or lack of supply play a larger and larger role as that curve of block subsidy flattens out?
So I'm going to tie these two together, the 4-year cycle and power law. And I think that my answer and reasoning for both of these comes down to human nature, or just nature in general. I think that, humans as individual actors are going to reach their own conclusion about what's best for them. And as as societies, it's the same, right? So as the scale increases, I think it's the same thing. So, we're going to make individual choices with our own agency. We're going to make individual choices with our own community. We're going to make individual choices with our own states, our own countries. And I think that is why I think that the power law thing is real. And that is also why I think that the cycle theory is real as well. I don't necessarily think that there's a reason that it has to be, mathematically, especially at this point with most of the Bitcoin issuance, already having taken place. It doesn't necessarily make sense on paper anymore. There are much more influential factors in the Bitcoin price, right? We're talking about the dollar price of Bitcoin, which is only relevant, for a period of time. Eventually it becomes irrelevant. But what would have to happen? I would say I'd have to observe it happen once. Once we break the cycle theory, then I think that it's over. And I know that's kind of a cop-out answer. Like, obviously, once it's broken, it's broken. But I still think that we're a long way from that. At least 2 or 3 cycles minimum, maybe more, where we're actually going to be able to observe, some degree of repetition of the chart shape, essentially. And I don't want to plot it too hard on again, I mentioned this earlier, a 12-year or 12-month calendar, just like a standard 12-month calendar, because I don't think that Bitcoin cares about that. So I would say when we're observing in block time, the cycles, I think, are going to continue to appear on a chart for a while. And again, I have to give the disclaimer that I don't know what the US dollar is going to do. So I'm going to just make this statement based off of purchasing power, generally speaking,
right,
rather than the US dollar. Because, I mean, if the US dollar falls tomorrow, obviously cycle theory is dead in the traditional sense.
Yeah, and I think when people think of power law, they're thinking of that chart that I popped up here, where it's like the fiat price of power law. If you're talking about power law in terms of sheer purchasing power, it could be that this is not that graph, but in terms of power law, that we're much earlier on the steeper section of power law, where yes, in terms of fiat price, it could look like, man, this just broke all models. But in terms of your view on it, no, it's still following power law, but that fiat price is based on monetary debasement that is going to be a different translation of that purchasing power, if you will.
Right. I think Bitcoin is the best reflection of that debasement of money, and even more specifically, the debasement of the world reserve currency, the US dollar. And it's very easy to predict that debasement. The debasement of the US dollar is very consistent. I can essentially tell you what our debt's going to be globally, 5 years from now. I can't necessarily tell you what the price of Bitcoin is going to be, but I think that it's going to be directly related.
Michael asks another question here. So what about the gradually then suddenly? I think there's still a suddenly in the forecast, or many different kinds of suddenlies for a while people are like, what is this? Like, I'm late again. Bitcoin 1 million, Bitcoin 10 million. So say Michael's saying here, 10 million in 2045 could still just be gradually. Does that fit your view on the power law?
So these are two contradictory thoughts, right? And I say I've changed my mind on this a few times. So right now I'm in the camp of power law, which would really essentially invalidate gradually then suddenly thesis. I'll make an amendment to that, in that I think that the suddenly part can very well apply to adoption. It can very well apply to, your own local currency debasement, and many other things where we could still have this gradually moment where the people around us reach this, point of using Bitcoin ubiquitously and all of these things. And it could still technically fit a power law model. But for the most part, if we're talking about Parker Lewis's thesis, that would break the power law.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's, I don't want to say that I understand the thesis more than any of these other people do, especially the gradually then suddenly thesis, because it's Parker's thesis and not mine. But I think that if you believe in the power law, then the gradually then suddenly thesis falls apart. So you can believe in one or the other, but not both at the same time. And right now I'm on the power law track, and who knows, I might go back once I see something else. But it is remarkable to see, if you're looking at, just do 5 minutes of study on power laws, and look at Bitcoin through a power law lens for 5 minutes. And I think if you haven't done that, I think there will be some eye-opening.
And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not arguing against it at all. I think when people, and the way I first heard of power law was the fiat price. And so then I was and being, the dollar being the language of the way we think about like this property. It's like, you know what? No, it's going to break the models. But so even as it's following power law, it could be that down the road, what we're seeing in that's obeying power law, but we're just like, whoa, this is face melting, and it's we're in the suddenly now. It doesn't translate to what we think is normal. It's a whole nother monster. And anyway, I want to shift tack here if we can, because we're at an hour. And are you good for a little time if I bring up some extra about our values and things?
I'm fine.
Cool.
Yeah, all on you.
There's a lot to talk about, and I know Michael Jordan has very strong values in his approach. I think the reason a lot of us found Bitcoin early, and two, stuck with it. It boils down to values, core values. Maybe we're crazy, but we're not needing to follow a herd. We don't need to be told, it's time now, or everyone else is doing it. We have core values that are more fundamental to sheer just economics, or getting yours, number go up. It's so much more deeper than that, and it goes from mind, body, and spirit, if you will. The fiat game that we grew up in, just living and breathing fiat, it's hard to see it because it's like you never saw anything different necessarily. Bitcoin changing the fundamental rule where you start to notice the fiat food, the fiat stuff. Tying back into the title I had for this Fiat Christmas special, I will go on a little story here. Leading up to Christmas, every year, I grapple with personal feelings I have about the season and the spirit of it and what I would like it to be about. But what we see if you go in the stores, or when you have kids, or when you have friends and family, and you want to communicate that feeling, but things are very consumption oriented. I darn near avoid the store, but I'll walk in there. I need to get some stuff, or I need to like kind of appropriately keep up with the transactional relationship aspect of it. And I'm just like, what is all of this craziness? And it gets out of hand. I can largely avoid it and not think about it and be like, yeah, I know it is what it is. And I can just kind of avoid it. But the spirit of the season is much deeper than that. I know it is for you, for our friends and families. My wife will joke with me. My wife loves Christmas. Now, it's not that we don't have values about it for ourselves and for the kids, but it's for the kids. It's often very much about like presents, or a lot of people go down the storytelling translation of things being Santa Claus and all the things. It's easy, you know, a lot of people being, whether they're secular or not particularly religious, Santa fills that void.
Yeah.
That can be total fiat. I mean, it can be kind of the fun and magic and spirit of Christmas, sure. It can also be straight up like, give me stuff. I want stuff. And when I was a kid, I remember grappling with those feelings where I was so caught up in Santa and the stocking and the presents and like, oh, I wanted this and I got that. And oh my gosh, the monkey fiat brain that I had as a kid, and even now, I've whoa, what just happened to my camera?
Dramatic zoom.
I don't know what that is. I got so there's a thing. I got a new whoa. I I got a new camera for Christmas. So this is a Christmas gift, is my new camera. I'll see if I can fix this. But before I do that, I'm gonna now. Well, first, before I go on my next phase of this thread, tell me about your experiences with Christmas. I know you posted something about Christmas and perhaps the spirit of it, but tell me about Fiat Christmas and how you manage that.
I grew up in a Christian home. We did do Santa when I was a kid. And so we did the whole, go to bed and Santa comes down the chimney while you're sleeping. And I remember my dad would take like his work boots and put like powdered sugar on the bottom of them and sprinkle them around the house to make it look like he like had snow on his boots or something. We'd leave cookies out for Santa, and all of our, the presents under the tree, they were from Santa. And I remember I was really young. I was probably around 5, and I just started thinking about it. And I'm like, this does not make sense. Something doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Like this Santa guy coming down our chimney, doing all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, I don't think Santa's real. And so for years, I just kept my mouth shut because I had a little brother, and then eventually another little brother, but I knew that he really enjoyed Santa, and he really bought into all that, and I knew about the magic of Santa. Like that part, kind of made sense. Trying to make things exciting and fun for the kids. And so I decided that I wasn't going to say anything about it. But a number of years went on, and I think by the time I was like 7 or 8, maybe, I just told my parents, I said, yeah, I by the way, I know Santa's not real, but I'm very, I don't remember where it went on from there. But my point is, I grew up doing the Santa thing.
Yeah.
But I was also raised in a Christian home. And so that was part of the contradiction for me is Christmas about Santa and Christmas and this, all of these secular things that we're told is what Christmas is about, or is Christmas about celebrating the birth of Jesus? What is it? And I wasn't really too conflicted about that growing up. I kind of balanced, both of them. We'd do the Santa Christmas thing, and then, we'd sprinkle some church stuff in there or whatever, some religious stuff. And that was fine. And then as I kind of got older, I started to just observe some of the history of Christmas. And again, this isn't something that I'm an expert on, but it is
like me. You probably care something about truth, or when you get over the childhood fairy tale of it all, it's like, no, really, what is this about, really? What you want truth?
Yeah, and so as a young adult, I started learning about the commercialization side of Christmas, and how everything has been changed over the years from what Christmas was, say, 100 plus years ago. Over the last just 100 years, even specifically in the United States, all these corporate efforts to just twist what Christmas is to
Totally.
get people to spend money.
Yeah.
And, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. A big culprit of this was Coca-Cola.
Yep.
I'm not necessarily speaking bad about them, but, they're a big part of this and getting people to buy their product.
Yep.
But it wasn't just them. It was a lot of different industries kind of just teamed up together and realized, hey, our sales suck in winter. We got to do something about that. Our fourth quarter sales are terrible. So why don't we hop onto this Christmas thing and make it about, buying stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so there were a lot of just different secular Christmas ideas that kind of culminated into this, what we mostly celebrate in the US today and around the world, is this commercialized secular Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last few years, I would say like probably post-COVID, I got to the point where I was like, why are we even doing this? And by the way, we never really did Santa with our kids. I don't think we ever did. I'm trying to think with my oldest if we ever did. Maybe before she was old enough to understand what was going on, but
that can be hard to do when there's peer pressures. It's actually quite admirable, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly harder because, we were faced with the fact that, hey, are we going to just like lie to our kids? Like, is it okay to lie if it's for fun?
Yeah.
And I'm not.
How long do you string that along?
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think that anybody should feel bad for what they want to do on Christmas.
Sure.
But if it is something that you feel convicted about, maybe explore that a little bit. That's what I did, and I didn't want to go down that path. I wanted Christmas to be about Jesus, and I wanted my kids to be raised in a home that celebrated Jesus during Christmas, rather than all these other things, which I knew even before I was a Bitcoiner were not good things, admirable things, right?
Mm-hmm.
This fiat world, this mentality of just spending tons and tons of money on things that you don't need, want, or use, and then this hyper focus on Christmas as basically, and I've said this recently, like worshiping Santa. Like that's essentially what people are doing. They're worshiping Santa instead of worshiping Jesus, especially if you're a Christian. I think that that's something you should definitely look at and consider.
Yeah.
So as time went on, I've become more and more trying to think of a good word for this.
Based.
Yeah, I don't know. Again,
maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's the way I see it. I don't think that everybody would see it that way. But I mean, we don't even do Christmas trees anymore. We used to, but we gave up our Christmas trees. And for me, I was personally convicted about the idea of having this symbol in our home that doesn't represent Christ. And there's plenty of argument there whether or not it's a Christian thing or whatever the tradition is. But
there's the first commandment aspect to it. Because if you go too far with it, it's like, okay, no, we're not worshiping it, but we're doing all these shrineage type things around that. And in lieu of what?
Yeah. And honestly, the one thing that got me and ultimately my wife on board, and it took a little while for me to convince my wife. But that's actually the root of why we kind of reached the conclusion we did. It was how much we held on to it. It's how much personal pain we felt in giving it up. And that's what really clicked for us. It's like, man, why is this object taking up so much spiritual real estate in our lives, right? Like emotional real estate. Why was getting rid of the Christmas tree such a big deal? And it made us feel so strongly about it. And I think that was the best argument for us for the fact that we were using that in our lives as a placeholder for somewhere Christ should be. And so again, it's not one of those things where I ever judge anybody for how they celebrate Christmas or whatever. It's just that was my personal journey, and I think that the inevitable conclusion for me was just trying to get rid of everything else so that we can focus more on Christ and focus more on what I think Christmas ought to be about. Because we can buy our kids presents any day of the year. We can do whatever we want, at other times. But when it's Christmas, I feel like there's just one day, like go ahead and just make it about Christ. Like, that's my argument.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we do gifts, by the way. I'll say,
yeah,
we still do gifts and that sort of thing. I think that there's a biblical precedent to the gifts. Christ received gifts on his birthday on Christmas. So, yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons why we still do gifts. But anyway, I'll leave it there. What else did you have?
Because I think about I have a 4-year-old, I have a 12-year-old. I also have 2 older boys. And so you're managing kind of a range of ages, but as a little kid grows up and they get old enough to maybe decipher something about Santa, it's like, how much are you doubling down on like the lies or the mythology, if you will? And when they start to figure it out, if you didn't replace that with what the spirit or the values are about what all this is, well, all you've done is like trained them in Fiat brain, I guess, and they're either stuck with, well, there's something to this. There's the feeling you have, the relationships, the connections that naturally occur during the season, and it means something. It's tied up in your early emotions about all that stuff. But if you don't get back to like, well, then what is this about? And you just continue with the Fiat Christmas, well, you're just kind of like doubling down on Fiat. And I'm not saying that that's Fiat. You can have your balance with that.
Yeah.
But in my family now, if you'll indulge me for a bit, I'm going to bring something up. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm not prescriptive at all when it comes to religion. I'm open-minded in terms of belief systems. There's a variety there. And I wasn't raised with any particular religion, really. There were aspects of Christianity to it, but I didn't grow up with that. And as I get older and you have kids, you run into these questions about, like, for me, it could be like Fiat and Bitcoin, or Fiat and like your soul. And so get into like the core values of not just Bitcoin and Fiat, but like who we are on this planet and why, and where are we going? If you're naturally curious, you want to ask these questions. Well, where does that lead you? And we're faced with a whole bunch of nihilistic FUD in this world. Here's something that my family has had a tradition of reading, and this came from an older generation, the next generation up, that have just basically continued a tradition, is that we'll just take a moment, and I'm just going to pop up. Now, again, this is not to be prescriptive or to say, oh, you should be Christian. I'm just saying Christianity can be a good anchor point for a lot of people when you run into, well, I've done all the Fiat things, but it's not filling my void. Now what? So Luke chapter 2, verse 1 and onward. It's interesting how it starts out, actually. It's discussing the birth of Jesus. And this is from the King James Bible. Interrupt me if you want to. I'm just going to read a little bit of this here. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary and his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished, and that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. It goes on. I wanted to bring that up because, does that resonate with you? I will point out one thing. I didn't expect that message that people are fairly familiar with to start out with the idea of taxes, of all things.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting, and I think a nice little bridge into the way a lot of Bitcoiners think. And yeah, Good point out, Michael Jordan. Jesus, there is no second best. I agree with that. And I think that what it really comes down to is, I think that people generally don't ask enough questions, because I think that this is my own belief. I believe there is a singular there is a singular source of truth. I believe I believe is a singular source of truth, and I'm sure that people that disagree with me would say the same. But the definition of truth is that there really is one, right? And I'm not saying that my version of it is the correct one, although that is my belief, right? That's why I believe it. And so I think as we ask questions, that's why I think it's important to ask questions and seek the truth. I think that a lot of these things converge, right? I think if you ask enough questions, you realize taxes are bad. Going back to the verse you read,
the origin of money and the origin of taxes and all the things. It's like Bitcoin fixes this. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it is funny. So yeah, Bitcoin fixes this, and in the case of the verse you just read, Jesus fixes this, right? Despite the fact that the overseers are trying to tax our freedoms away. We still have Jesus. We still have Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is a nice little kind of symbol, of the redeeming qualities of Jesus. Again, I'm not intending to compare the two, because they're not the same thing at all.
Right.
But I do think that Bitcoiners are naturally more inclined to be truth seekers. And I think there's a lot of similar truths between both Bitcoin and Jesus, which is why I choose Bitcoin as my money, because I believe that it is more closely aligned with my personal beliefs, and my standards and my ethics. So I think that the story of Jesus is a great example of what happens when a government tries to control everything and they can't. So
Right.
Jesus was born whether or not the government wanted him to be, and I think it's a beautiful message.
It's a beautiful thing, and it's a tale as old as time when you think of sovereigns that initiate control, want to maintain control, wield their control, and boy, doesn't it boil down to the money every time. And what's the escape hatch? What I do love the parallel to Bitcoin in terms of the immaculate conception, if you will. I don't want to oversimplify it, because there was a lot that led up to it, a lot of good apostles that built up to it. Satoshi becomes that kind of a mysterious Godhead figure, and that the mystery of Satoshi. People can often worship that, if you will, in the Bitcoin space of Satoshi and the Immaculate Conception. I will say it's about as magical of a thing as you can get in with that technology, with money. And it parallels feelings I will have about it all. But what that did for me, I will just admit that as I learned and studied and got in on Bitcoin over years, it percolated into core values for me that inherently, if you're going to be honest and try to understand yourself or know yourself, they are spiritual. You could say, well, it's something else. It's just something very deep. That's fine. But for me, ultimately, it was kind of a spiritual journey as well, keeping my compass aligned, if you will. And so then when you encounter challenges or opportunities in your life, you're grounded in making good decisions based on values, Bitcoin being the most ethical money. But then even beyond all money aside, what are you going to die with all your Bitcoin intact? There's a deeper why to all of that as well. So it speaks to me in that way as well.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's interesting to note while we're on the subject is I'm in a unique perspective, and I'm sure, a lot of vocal public Christian Bitcoiners may have similar experiences too. But if you're outside, maybe you're not really seeing this, but I get lots and lots of personal direct messages, people reaching out to me, telling me that they have come to ask some of the questions about their own existence, their own life, their own relationship with Jesus and the Bible. And they've told me that because of Bitcoin has led them down this path of asking these questions. And I actually put a poll out not too long ago, and I don't have it pulled up, but it was something to the effect of, has Bitcoin drawn you closer to Christ, or something like that? And a large number of people said yes. It's surprising, and it's something that I don't think should be ignored. And again, I think the simple answer to that is Bitcoin is truth. Bitcoin is a version of truth, and truth seekers tend to ask more questions. And so, sorry, was there a question that popped up there?
Oh, let me bring this up also from Michael Jordan. So again, it's like, don't trust, verify. The evidence of life, death, and resurrection is compelling and better documented than any other ancient event. And that's another thing. Even if you are religious or you grew up in a certain church, I think you have to integrate, whether it's all the trappings about the belief systems or the book itself, or the translations given to you, the interpretations, you have to reconcile that against yourself. And as you grow as a human, it could change, or you need to allow it also to change you, but not to just say, well, I can't necessarily think I can't know what I think until maybe I'm like told. And so it's always kind of, and I think Jesus taught this, is that you're not waiting on the bishop or the priest to just tell you what it is. You're going to listen, you're going to learn, but you have to reconcile it with, your own direct observation, your personal engagement in life. And I think that's what's important, is that maybe spirituality helps you engage with life. And also your engagement with life can help you see more clearly as you walk that path. And so whether you're Christian or Buddhist or anything out there, I think it's that the importance is that you're walking yourself. You're taking those steps. You're not putting the blinders on. You're not avoiding it. You're not just saying, well, that's just what I do, I don't think about it. You're staying engaged with life. So that is living, is paying attention. I'll bring this up. I think this was interesting too. So then, through the story, I think of banking, and you could get into the money and the politics of the message as well. I think this is kind of funny, but anyway, it connects all through and through. So
yeah, Jesus had a problem with the bankers too.
Yeah,
So
a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if you think about whether it's our founding fathers or the spiritual messengers we've had. Man, what would they think of our fiat system today? It would be like, they wouldn't be compliant. I don't think I think our federal government would go after them. So with that, do you see any, I mentioned this before, but the companies that you work with, steady as we go, or do you have to keep an eye on kind of the navigations of politics, governance? I have the Cypherpunks manifesto here, and Eric Hughes writes in there how information wants to be free. Cypherpunks write code. Information wants to be freed. At one level, it's like, what are you gonna criminalize cryptography or strings of code or free speech? Code is speech. You write something up, you share it with the world, you walk away. But if they can dox you, you're liable for that. Do you ever worry about that as you work on new projects going forward?
I don't worry about it from, as a rule. But I think that it is something to be conscious of, depending on where you fit into the market or the industry or society. I think there are different categories of people building things. You've got the builders that are doing the, like the centralized, hyper financialized exchange type products where you have to comply with the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970, for example. These are the most compliant builders in the space. Just look at any Bitcoin exchange, right? Anything that touches US dollars, and they have to comply with a bunch of these rules. And then you have businesses like, Manna, for example, what I'm building, where we don't have any bridge or overlap, or there's nothing to do with the traditional fiat financial system in Manna, and so we're like a step removed from that, but we do still need to be able to offer our product on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, which means we need a registered business. And so we have a registered business in the state of Kansas. And this comes with some restrictions and some regulation that we have to comply with as well. But then take it a step further, there are other builders who are able to build tools that are completely anonymous. They're not as accessible to the general public, again, because you want to get into these centralized systems. You got to play the game to a degree, and it's it's unfortunate and it's messed up. You can't just do anything you want in these traditional regulated systems. And so I'm not worried about it, because I think the cypherpunks are going to continue to build and provide tools on the front of where people still always have access to the things that they need to maintain their freedom. I think Pandora's box has been opened. The cat's out of the bag. I think we have Bitcoin. We have the promise that it provides, and we can't put that back in. Now it can be contained. It can be delayed through the government's control over our own personal bodies, right? Our governments could, quote unquote, make Bitcoin illegal, but they can't stop it. It's always going to work. And so it's really, again, it goes back to the game theory thing. It's just a matter of time where the path of least resistance, the system that contains and retains the most amount of energy, is going to be the one that wins out in the long run. So I'm not worried about it. I think it's going to be okay.
I feel complete hope and bullishness about that as well. I think and maybe we're there already, but there's a point where governments can try to wall it in, and all they're doing is walling themselves off from the solution to everything. And so they lose in the end. They can't wall it in and think they're going to control it. They lose. Now, building even up and beyond your companies, you have started or your advisory board member, is it, of Bitcoin is Better?
Yeah.
Let me bring up this website here. Financial Freedom for Middle-Class Families, a nonprofit doing a lot of education work, helping people start and save in Bitcoin. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
I'd love to. So our goal is basically just reaching people with Bitcoin. We have a lot of really cool stuff coming out that I can't speak too specifically about yet. Just know that within the coming weeks, there is a lot of stuff that I'm going to be able to talk about here pretty soon. But we're going to start reaching people all over the country, potentially all over the world, with the message of Bitcoin in a very unique way. And yeah, actually, go ahead and click on ads. Yeah, so coming soon. So that's what we're working on right now. And it's going to be really fun. And I think the Bitcoin community is going to have a really good time participating in this. This is going to be a way for people to participate and get some entertainment along the way too. It'll be a very social thing. What we really do is, it's of course a nonprofit. So, everything's donation based. If you want to support us, you're welcome to. The donate button there. Yeah. So anybody that wants to donate, we basically, again, the mission and everything that we do is tied toward growing Bitcoin and making Bitcoin reachable and understandable to everybody. And that, honestly, that really mostly comes down to the no coiners, right? Because Bitcoiners kind of already get and understand that message, but we want to partner with Bitcoiners to help bring that message out to everybody. And so we're going to do it in a really cool, novel way. We have some tools that are being built and they're almost done. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you more about it when it comes out, I promise. But it's gonna be really, really fun.
I love it because every Bitcoiner, you go down the path, and if you're a maxi like me, oftentimes where my mind goes is that, and Jeff Booth has mentioned this before, I keep referring to him, but he'll be like, okay, you're doing stuff in Bitcoin. What more could you do in Bitcoin? It's not like what Bitcoin can do for you. What can you do for Bitcoin? You're contributing. It's a community. It's also a saving technology for all of humanity. What more can you do? I've thought about this. I will refer to MicroSeed here, being involved with that, this podcast, just trying to do things in this space. My buddy came up with this invention and design. I was like, we have to make this work. I'm all into self-custody. So that's our company, Daniel White and Robin Sayer and I. It's just like run a node, take self-custody, and then what you're doing is educate, educate, educate. People need to understand this, not just from number go up, but just like a legacy of generational savings and the fix for your family, for your tribe, for your community. So you're doing that next step instead of just business. It's giving back in a way, really.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's why I teamed up with Bitcoin is Better as a board member. Obviously, it's not something I get paid to do. In fact, it's the opposite. I donate to Bitcoin is Better to help support them. But it's really just a way for me to help give my time and service to help a mission that I believe in. And one other thing I want to mention on that subject is if you are a business, or if you are a educator, a podcaster, if you have a Bitcoin platform, and you want us to point people in your direction, a part of what we're going to be releasing is going to be promoting Bitcoin companies, businesses, builders, and things like that. So MicroSeed, for example, if you want to send us a message and let us know you want to be listed, we're going to have a resource. We're going to have resources for all sorts of different Bitcoin products and companies and everything like that. And there's no additional cost or anything associated with it. We're just basically going to be doing a bunch of free advertising for Bitcoiners and Bitcoin companies. So if anybody out there listening, you want to be a part of that, you can go ahead and reach out to bitcoinisbetter.org. The contact info is on the website. Just send us a message and we'll start planning and getting you plugged into our resources page.
That's awesome. Yeah. Because we like to refer people to, say, like the Bitcoin way, for example. What we think about, okay, yeah, we have our thing here. We're doing this niche here. But people will come with questions about, well, I want to, so you say run a node. What node? How do I do that? Whatever. Well, we like start 9. Go run a start 9. Well, I want to mine. How should I start mining? Well, I mean, I've got my little solo miners, BitX, Solo Satoshi things there. I could say, hey, get yourself a bit kit. Now, granted, people enter it going, I want to make money mining. It's like, here's what I do. I'm not thinking, I mean, yeah, you're going to see your sats. Maybe if you're in a pool, you're going to see some sats collect and all that, or lotto mine if you want. You feel like you got skin in the game. It's not as much about the money. It's contributing hash to the network, making it decentralized. It's like, why are you mining? Like, you're going to compete with these big dogs? No, not really. Or you're going to get your slice that makes it worthwhile? Not really. But way better than that is contributing to the network, contributing a node, contributing hash, taking self-custody, getting it off exchange. People come to us with questions. It sounds like Bitcoin is Better is going to help people like from all walks of life. They show up. How do I get off zero? How do I take self-custody? How do I run a node? How do I do all these things? And as you've approached it with your own companies, it's not like, here's all these technical things about doing it just right. And, but if that, and if the other, it's really complicated, but I'll try to make it simple. No, just straight out of the gate, like you've done with with Manna and the BitKit, is accessibility, keeping it simple, getting people started, and letting them plug and play if they want to. Now, beyond that, they can do it, but you're getting them. The accessibility is right there. So I like the approach and the education direction now you have going.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, yeah, Michael Jordan's been in this chat pretty much with us the whole time through this whole video. So shout out to him and the Bitcoin Way. They're great, by the way. I'm not paid or sponsored by them in any way. I know those guys. They are extremely based and they're very knowledgeable. And I would recommend them to anybody that wants to learn more about Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not not paid, but we refer people to the Bitcoin way all the time, because just you get those questions. You could like babysit a boomer through their lifetime of technical support needs and be like, oh my God. Or you could say, hey, call the Bitcoin way. So anyway, thanks, Michael, for joining. Before we wrap up, boy, it's been an hour and 40 minutes. I really appreciate your generous time with me, Adam. Again, Manna Wallet. I will just bring up here. Let me bring up to stage. We got your Bitcoin is better nonprofit for education. We have you can be found on X at it's going to have to reload here. Adam Simecka on X at Adam Simecka. Manna Wallet here. There's Bitcoin is better. BTC is better org on X takes you to the website. Manna Wallet. Let me let it load. They close out after a moment. They have to think about it. Manna Bitcoin on X. And of course, you can go to the website, mannabitcoin.com. News, connections. If you want a good wallet, simple, just in seconds, get up to speed and you're going. Totally easy. And then your miner, hands-free BTC. You've got your BitKit, couple of S9s going, plug and play, totally easy to use. Hands-free BTC on X. So anyway, all great connections, all great follows. Adam, is there anything that I didn't touch on or something you want to say before we wrap this up that you'd like to connect on?
Man, I don't know. I just want to say thank you. Actually, very thorough. I don't think there's anything that got missed, but very grateful for the opportunity to be here with you today and the conversation. I think it was a fantastic conversation and really appreciate all the questions.
I appreciate that. We try to cover the bases and we got nice and based. Appreciate your, well, there was one rabbit hole I almost thought of touching on, and we can let it go unless you really want to talk about it. But I love your t-shirt.
Thank you.
We got into that. It's that, freedom of speech, sovereignty, is America beholden to anyone else? Are you beholden to anyone else, or are you truly free as a person? So I like to get back to some based core values like we talked about. So anyway.
Yeah, I'll just say one quick thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's obviously
LOL.
People don't recognize this shirt. It's the shirt that Charlie Kirk was wearing when he was killed.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important for us not to idolize any one person individually. I certainly don't idolize Charlie Kirk in any way. In fact, there were some small things that he and I would have definitely disagreed on, but sure. I think overall the message of what Charlie Kirk stood for, some of the things that he believed ultimately is really the direction that I want to take my life. So he inspired me. I didn't really follow him before the event, but I started watching some of his older stuff after everything happened, and his life inspired me. And this was a gift from a family member for Christmas, and this is the message here. It's all about freedom, and not everybody knows the answer to how to achieve that best. But I think a good starting point is Bitcoin, and then on the spiritual side, Jesus. I think those are the two best ways that you could take your path into becoming more free. The freedom with your money and freedom in Jesus, I think, are the two best freedoms in life that anyone could ever attain.
Yeah, I was aware of Charlie Kirk. I didn't follow him regularly. I was just kind of aware of the space he filled and the tenacious genius that he was as a communicator, which I respected because it was just like public square, folks. Let's talk about anything. I totally respect that. We can disagree, and at the end of the day, there's respect. And that was a huge contribution to like, hey, we can disagree, we can banter and argue or discuss. But when he was assassinated, it was a dark, sad day. Even if I had never known of him at all, I would have been impacted simply as a human. And then I was initially angry for certain reasons. And then as I learned a little bit about it, I was angry for other reasons. And then depending on how far you want to track all that, you can start to get upset or angry about a lot of things. And then you don't want to get, you don't want to peer into the void so far that the void peers into you. If that's a Nietzsche quote or something. Anyway, you could peer down some voids if you want, things that are beyond your control. And that's where you get into, well, I can't control a large entropic universe, but there is something about truth and humanity on this world. And so how do I find that? And that's where you need to come back and find what light resonates with you, get back to the light, and not get over your skis psychologically about, even as you pursue truth, you're not taking on more than you can handle. And if you do start to feel that, back up and get back to that core, perhaps spiritual aspect to it all. And I think that's a good foundation for people to have. So if there's anything you want to add to that, you can, but it's been a long time. I can let you go.
I think that's a good to wrap it up before we get ourselves in too much trouble.
I know. If we get into this, Michael's warned us, but if we get too far down that, people with opinions will disagree or very much agree, and we'll get into a fight. So we'll leave it at that. But anyway, Adam, it's been a major pleasure. I really enjoyed this talk. We got to talk about so many interesting, fun, truthful things. And I appreciate the time you gave me. And hey, down the road, when you get further with the nonprofit, Bitcoin is better. Mm-hmm. Let me know. We could talk about it some more on here if there's stuff you want to show off.
Awesome. Yeah, I would absolutely love that. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of fun. I promise you, it's going to be a good time, and people are going to enjoy it.
Awesome. I look forward to it, man. And we'll see you online and elsewhere down the road.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
You're welcome. You too. Bye, everybody.